matter of preference from a preservation standpoint.
Does anybody else have any questions about the proposal or the materials used?
I don't think so. I'll make a motion then. I'll move to approve the amended application for a certificate of appropriateness as submitted and per testimony for the dormer and kitchen windows at 253 West 10th Street based on the local guidelines and Secretary of Interior Standard Number 9. New additions, exterior alterations, or related new construction will not destroy historic materials, features, and spatial relationships that characterize the property. The new work will be differentiated from the old and will be compatible with the historic materials, features, size, scale, proportion, and massing to protect the integrity of the property and its environment. And in that motion, I'm approving the 2 windows in the dormer and either 2 or 3 windows on the main floor in that kitchen area.
I'll second.
Does anybody have any comments before we put it to a vote? Okay. So all those in favor of approving the COA say yes.
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 All those opposed say no. I also say yes, so the motion carries.
All right, thank you very much. I
Thank
appreciate
you.
it.
Thank you.
Great. So next up under new business is a certificate of appropriateness application for 303 Pine Avenue. How you doing?
Good, how are you?
Good. You want to give us the?
Yes. So we have 3 different sort of proposals within this larger application for 303 Pine. The applicant is looking to replace all of the windows in the home, to replace all of the siding, and then to also do some repairs to the front steps that will be primarily in kind, like for like, not drastically changing everything. So for just a little bit more detail, it's my understanding that the window replacement is sought to sort of increase uniformity throughout the house, also to increase functionality. Perhaps we'll be able to have a little bit more detail on why this is desirable for the property. All of the proposed windows, when replaced, will be double hung, except for a couple of casement windows on the second floor to provide egress. And the type of window that's proposed for the replacement is Pella Lifestyle Wood windows, which is aluminum clad on the exterior. The individual sizes of the windows will be modified from what's there existing. The individual sizes were included in the packet. There's a lot of them. Most of them, from my interpretation, are going to be smaller than what's there currently. Some additional notes is that there are shutters, and it looks like some sort of architectural detail, perhaps filling in where a larger window once was on the home. The applicant is not planning to retain that. And I believe, I'm unclear on if there'll be simulated divided lights or true divided lights. And then also the renderings show a 4/4 arrangement on the windows. This wasn't something we had talked about previously. So if you're willing to maybe provide a little bit more detail, and I'm sure the commissioners will have some questions. That's the window portion. I don't know if you'd like me to keep going, if we should look at that first. I'm willing to kind of hear your thoughts.
With big proposals, we typically kind of parse them down into one thing at a time so that we can really work through those.
That's great.
Items, if you're
This
good
is a
with
big
that.
one, yeah.
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 So is everybody good with starting just with the windows as a first point? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, so big proposal here. So I'm sure many of you know this property. It's almost on this block here. I added some of the details of kind of condition of what's going on. There's probably 2 windows that we could save. They're the ones that don't match the rest of the house. They look like they were installed maybe a couple years ago. They're newer casement size windows. And like Anna was saying, they covered up a portion of one of the windows with wood to make it match the right height of the other one, and they shrunk the other window that they replaced. So yeah, you can see right there from the side that they kind of didn't match that. A lot of the windows are kind of mismatch, and you know, they've been replaced in different times. The front main window there is one huge picture window and then 2 casements on the side, not matching the rest of the house. So really our intent was to bring the house back to one window style to make it look like it should have been when it was first built. The windows that we were looking at, the Pella Series Lifestyle, we're in the process still of bidding this out and kind of trying to figure out what we want to do. I would greatly appreciate some suggestions on what you're thinking with terms of the light division on the top. We were basically looking at the gridding going across the top, because as you go around, this is our first time in the historic district. As you go around, it looks like most houses are like that, so we would probably match that look as with the window. I didn't have the actual window, I just put the series in here that we would be grabbing. Like I said, I think 90% of the windows cannot be saved. They are either broken, the sills are broken, they don't work, they're cracked and damaged on the inside. They're really in really bad shape.
You've got a big project.
We have a really big project. We think it will be fun.
I've done one of these. They
Yeah.
are fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It'll be cool to see what it turns into
Uh-huh.
in the end. So when you were talking about that, we were shrinking some of the sizes. We were kind of trying to go to the closest size that we could get.
I see. Mhm.
Right now in the current market. If that is a problem, it's either go a little bit smaller or a little bit larger. I think when we were talking about some of the windows aren't meeting egress, they're too tall and they come right down to the floor. So in the bedroom, we would be looking at shrinking those up from the top so they meet egress code. And then if we needed to, we could make them wider if you wanted to match kind of the same light size. But there is a width on the front of the house. It's not a large house, so if we get too wide, it could look a little awkward too. And those 2 would be the upstairs, which the windows are right to the floor.
And Anna, this house is contributing, right?
It's non-contributing.
Okay.
Yep, I want to clarify
wanted-
that.
Yeah,
Yep.
that was my next.
It is a non-contributing home. It's not
Mhm.
entirely clear in its survey paperwork why, but we can see some
Well,
changes have been made over time.
And
Yeah.
it sounded like in the paperwork too, that the early history of it was unknown, so.
Yeah.
Very unclear. Yep.
Some of the windows, I think, I put the top 3, the top 2, 1 and 2 are the main front road facing on the second story. I put those as 1 and 2 because those are the ones that we're dealing with egress problems, but they also will change the look of the street facing windows the most. So I kind of wanted to put those right on the top.
Is that size window that you have, the 31.5 by the 37.5, is that reflected on that rendering farther down? Because those look a little taller.
Yeah, the rendering, I'm sorry, I'm not an architect or a builder. The rendering is what we are trying to get it to. They're not reflective of size
Okay.
or measurement.
Yep.
And it was kind of, we were just trying to put together, hey, this is what we're trying to do to make one even look across it.
Yeah.
They're not reflecting any sizes.
Okay. Yep. Because that 37.5, those would look a lot more square
Yes,
Mhm.
yes.
than pictured here.
So are you looking to get to ones that are more, square, or ones that are more?
We would be trying to get them as close to what they are now and still meet code for the egress upstairs. So what I don't want to do is change, if you look at the actual pictures of the house, there's not on those top windows. I guess I didn't give a big wide out. Oh, I did. Up on the top, when you're looking at each side of the house, you can see there's not a ton of room up there. If we go too wide, the windows will almost be touching, which is okay. We could bring them technically into the middle and have them meet. But if you get too short, they'll look really short and boxy and awkward. So there's going to be a play of, you know, what perfect size fits in there. I think right now we're trying to figure out, can we do this and what options do we have? And when we actually go and like measure out and frame and see what this looks like, we could come back and say, hey, this is the exact size we're looking at there.
On those upstairs windows, those are shutters that you're not planning on putting back, is that correct?
We weren't, no.
And that, I think, will really contribute to the look of the window when those things are gone, too.
Mhm. Yeah,
I'm thrilled you're doing the project. We live just down the street on 13th Street, and that
Yeah.
house has been in disrepair for
Oh,
a couple
yes.
of 3-4 years.
You can tell it's been a
really
long time.
neglected,
Yeah.
for sure.
with the beautiful church across the street, it's time to fix this one up.
Yeah.
I would like to encourage you to go taller and not wider wherever
Okay.
possible as a general rule. I heard you
Okay.
say something about bringing the sills up maybe a little bit.
Yes, yeah.
Is that to meet code to be 18 inches off the floor in
Yes,
there?
exactly.
And what is the reason for having to meet modern egress when you have these openings?
'Cause it's a bedroom
Life safety.
upstairs. Yeah, safety. We were just,
Okay.
if we're remodeling this house, we don't really want to have a bedroom that has issues
Smaller.
like that. Yeah, I know when my kids are up there playing, I'm actually even nervous about it when they're right next to the
Okay.
window.
Yeah, because in your proposal, you're losing 10 inches of height there,
Mhm.
and you're going from a double hung to a casement.
Yeah,
Both of those things are gonna kind of undermine this historic style, which is a really vernacular
yeah,
kind of turn of the century style where things were really oriented vertically in most cases as far as openings go.
okay,
And the only reason that we don't see that even more pronounced is these shutters.
yeah.
But they really are quite vertical, those openings without the shutters. And they're double hungs. So
Mhm.
it is quite a big jump to go from a double hung to a casement there and then also to shrink it. I wouldn't think that you would want to move those outboard, just because I don't think it'll look
Yeah.
right.
Okay,
Or also it'll start to crowd that soffit.
yeah,
And if you ever go to add a freeze board, which this might well have had, there wouldn't be room for a freeze board at that point either,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, I think that's a main concern of mine, those upper windows, just
okay,
not wanting those to be too squat. But yeah,
So maybe-
obviously the
maybe
egress
getting a-
is a concern and trying to get that shape and still have
Okay.
that, so. I'm not sure, have you looked into, like a single hung or double hung window option that would still meet egress and fit within the opening?
Yeah, it gets a little challenging to meet the actual square
they won't.
inches that you need to get out on a double hung, but
Yeah.
we can for sure look and see. I mean, our intent is to get as close as we can and
Yeah.
still have it work.
Yeah.
What you can do, you'll probably need a 36 by 60 is the smallest double hung that you can get, which is 3 foot by 5 foot. It's way bigger than this, and it's not really that vertical. So
Right.
then the next one that's more vertical, but that's also egress, is like 32 by 68.
Yeah.
And then you're down at the floor.
That.
But the good thing is with double hungs is you can get limiters, so they can't open up and a kid can fall out
Yeah,
if they're below that threshold of the 18 inches.
okay.
So that would be something, if you could live with the sill coming down quite a bit,
Do
that
a
would be,
limiter so we keep the outside look. Yeah,
you'd keep the double hung type, you'd achieve egress, but you'd have to have limiters.
okay.
And you just specify that when you get your windows bid. I don't think limiters are all that safe because I was able to still open up the thing. Like I have similar,
Yeah.
and I'm still able to open up the bottom sash just by like playing with the limiters sometimes. So it kind of still scares me from a kid standpoint, but from a code standpoint, they do allow you to have the limiters if you go below that height
Okay.
off the floor.
So the biggest challenge with that is going from the 47.5 tall down to the 37.
Yeah,
and
you're
losing
going
that
all the way
10
to the
inches.
floor and then up a little bit too.
Yeah.
Or you go to the 36 by 60 and then you're not going all the way down to the floor, but you have to go a little wider than you currently have,
Mhm.
which might feel a little big for that facade too,
Yeah.
because it's a tiny little elevation.
Yeah. Is that my phone right by the speaker? No, I think it's me. It's me. Any other thoughts besides the front two?
I think your instinct is right on to get rid of that bay window.
Yeah.
Same thing as
And switch to-
vertical.
yeah.
Yeah, so having those double hungs is a really nice thing.
It's the one thing that when you pull up really just doesn't, it just stands out at you that it doesn't fit. It makes it look like a face looking at you.
Mhm.
I think we could fix that. On the south side of the building too, of the house, there really was I would almost call it no kitchen was in this house. So raising that one window up is so that we could get above cabinets and make a modern kitchen in this house. I'm sorry, on the north side. I'm sorry, Anna. So the one closest to the porch up front is the newer casement style. It's 2 casement windows on there. I don't know when that was installed, but it goes down too far to be able to put cabinets underneath it. So that's one we would want to raise up and make it possible so that we could put cabinets underneath it.
And that was one of the ones that looked
That's
deteriorated too in the,
That's number 3.
yeah. Does anyone else have any questions about the windows? Otherwise, we can just pause on that for a minute and move on to the next portion of it.
I think only if we were approving something, what would we be saying we're okay with this concept, but we need to see more detail of what the size of the windows in the upper story, or I'm just trying to, I mean, I guess we can think about that when we come to the motion, but it seems like we don't have quite enough to just approve that part.
Especially because we don't actually have the window sizes that'll
Yeah.
end up.
Right. Okay.
Okay, so you're thinking like a to-scale drawing would help?
Well, the proposal does have window sizes of what he's proposing,
Right, but there was still question
but if
about
there's
what,
still some uncertainty, so
right,
either we would be approving what the application says and what window sizes are in there, or we could approve it with some stipulations to change those sizes, or allowing a couple options for those sizes or something like that, but.
Yeah, I think scale drawings of especially the front facade would be helpful to me to see, okay, what size what do they look like? It's hard for me to imagine the smaller window or, as Nick said, having that verticality seems important. And be even interesting for me to see them side by side versus split apart that way, but I don't know, that's more of a, just, while you're playing around with it. On paper, it's cheap to play around.
Well, do we want to stay on the windows or do we want to move on to?
Well, I want to throw one thing out there,
Yeah.
which is that there's a company out of the east side of the state that makes double hung tiny egress windows. And it's for the purpose of, I've got an opening that's too small for double hungs. So basically it's a double hung window that actually rides on a casement structure. The only issue is it's vinyl. And they don't make a lot of varieties. They only have like 2 sizes and they're just come in white vinyl. But I can tell by this house, by the elevation, that there's not a lot of room up there. Head height down to the floor. Those are small, little, humble little rooms. And so this could be a good candidate for like achieving the double hung look, having true egress in the form of a casement. And the only, I guess, issue that we would have is the material. But I throw it out there because somebody started a company for this reason. And it's actually for people who are doing basement egress, like bedroom situations, but who have double hungs on their whole house and want to keep with that look. And it's an interesting product. So I could forward that to Anna if you want. But we'd have to all be comfortable with the material there too. So it's something to consider. I think it's called Escape Windows is the company.
So should we move on to the next thing? Part of the application?
Let's move on to the siding discussion for right now, and then, because we'll have to revisit it anyway unless we break it up into 3.
Yep.
So let's move on to the siding portion, Anna.
Yes, so for the siding, they're proposing to replace all of the siding on the house. So we've already been looking at it a little bit. It's an sort of cement board, most likely asbestos, re-siding, damaged in some parts. And the proposed new siding is an LP Smartwood composite siding, which I have a sample of here, and I'll pass around. It's noted on there that the siding will be flat. Is that correct? It will
Smooth,
not have,
yeah, it
smooth. It won't have the
No
wood
wood
grain,
grain,
which has been a conversation before, I know. The siding will also have an 8-inch reveal. Currently, the reveal is larger on the home. I think it's probably closer to 10 inches maybe. So it will change the look in that way.
It's like it's like 11 and a quarter.
11
right
and
now,
a quarter,
something
okay.
A lot like that, yeah.
The siding itself, you can kind of see as you look at it, it's wood strands that are coated in wax and bonded with resin. This is the first time this siding has been brought up while I've been in this role, so I wasn't sure if all of you had seen it before. And that is everything I've prepared. I'm not sure, you welcome to add anything.
Yeah, there's extensive damage on this, and we've talked to a few companies. No one has any kind of product that could match this, and especially to replace the skirting that they threw around the bottom on the front portion of the house. I'm assuming it was to cover some damage that was extensive on the bottom part, and that is really causing a lot of water damage inside the house right now and down in the basement. So our intent was basically, as we're talking about windows and getting this house to have one even look, we obviously want the siding to look good as well.
So you'll run it horizontally all the way down? You won't do something different with the,
Nope.
to replace the skirting, it'll just be all the way?
All the way down, yeah,
Okay.
that one kind of siding all the way down.
Is that brick gonna be covered then?
No.
On that porch, or
Nope.
that's gonna
We're
stay?
leaving the brick exposed.
Okay. And then what was the thought process between the smooth versus the wood grain?
Just that you guys liked it, right?
in the
That you
guidelines.
recommended it,
Okay.
so we said, hey, if we're putting in new, we can do whatever we want. So if you guys
Yeah.
say, hey, we'd rather have the wood grain, we can do the wood grain, but we
Just curious.
recommended that smooth matches a little bit better.
Yeah.
Anna, can you go to the illustration, the 3D illustration? What do you
Sorry,
plan to
it's-
do
It's
at,
not, sorry, it's not, it's showing that the brick's covered on there, but no.
Oh, no,
we'd
that's
be-
o-
We'd be leaving the
that's
brick
okay.
exposed, I'm sorry.
I was just curious about what you're gonna do at the corner. Were you gonna maybe do a corner board, or were you gonna do a
Yeah.
mitered?
We were planning on corner board, yeah.
Have you done any exploring? Is that siding that's on there now the original one? Is there anything underneath that siding, or?
It does not, on the front where the front main casement window is falling apart, you
Yeah.
can peel back to the inside of the house and does not look
Okay.
like there's anything underneath it.
That's just such a strange product for me.
There was definitely
the
some
1920s,
substantial
so-
work done to this house at some point.
Yeah.
We just can't kind of pinpoint when.
And usually they just cover what was there before. So
Yeah.
a lot of times, if a new siding was put on in the 50s or something, you can just peel it off and find out what was underneath it. So
Well, I'm sorry, on the inside of the porch, there is, it's probably about a 2-inch reveal, 2 to 3-inch reveal wood siding, and I'm guessing that was the original.
Yeah.
It was probably torn off and replaced at some
And
point
when it-
because we
when it was
cannot, we
replaced,
don't
yeah.
see it on any of the other part of the house.
yeah.
I think the LP is really nice. The only comment I would have is if you do a corner board, I would suggest that you also do a freeze board
Okay,
and make it pretty fat, so it could be
Yeah.
like LP equivalent to like a 1x8 or something like that.
okay,
And then you can decide whether you want to have those corner boards and freeze board, and maybe a skirt around the bottom too. That's like a LP trim board
Mhm.
instead of just another row of siding, but that
Yeah.
would be more kind of, I think that would be kind of optional, but you could keep those white to kind of match the accents of the windows, or you could just paint them blue, like
yeah.
whatever color the siding is. But those two boards, or the corner board and the freeze board, I think would really help.
Frame in the house, yeah.
Yeah, and I
Mhm.
think that would have been something that that this house would have probably had.
Okay. I think I agree, that will look great.
Any other comments about siding? No? Okay, so let's move on to the steps.
Okay, the steps, I think Anna threw us some notes as we were handing this in. At this point, we're basically looking at repairing them with like material. And as it's warped on the top, so you can't open the front door. So as we look at repairing that, we would want to do an evaluation of the brick underneath. I know there's brick stairs under there. I know Anna mentioned that they were under there. We do want to take a look at those They look like they're very small. There might have only been 2 steps right up into the door. But if we're repairing the stairs as they stand right now, we obviously want to take a look at that because they did not do a great job adding these stairs on. If we were going to replace the stairs, we would do it the same way. We would just rebuild them so that they actually are level and straight and work for the house. I think we mentioned, or Anna, maybe you just mentioned as we were talking, if we did evaluate and said, hey, we do want to go back to the brick stairs, we would just come back and say, hey, it looks better than we thought, and we do want to use those.
Yeah. With your rebuild, are you planning on rebuilding the entire railing system too, or are you just looking at like the deck boards themselves?
I think we're going to have to rebuild the whole railing
The
system.
railing as well? Okay.
If you put too much weight on it right now, it's going to go down.
Have you given any thought to your new front door yet?
We haven't, no. Oh, we know with,
Sorry.
we know with this house we're gonna be back here. So we're trying
curious.
to we're trying to hit the big things first so we can get it started and get bids out there and start figuring out what we actually have to do. Right now, that front door and that porch is just a storm door. It's not a exterior door at this moment. So I would love suggestions if you guys say, hey, this is what we would like to see on it.
So Anna, with the COA, I mean, we could really, for the front stairs, we could do that conditional the same way that we could with the windows and some of the others too.
Yes, yep.
Because you won't know until you get into it what you're dealing with underneath there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, our concern was that we didn't want to get too deep into pulling stuff apart without having a conversation about what's happening. Because once we pull it apart, there's no returning with some of this. So.
I think we need to keep in mind that windows are something that's a long lead item.
Mm-hmm.
So planning for a certain size, it's not one where you can call an audible
Yeah.
once you've got the whole place torn apart.
Yeah.
And we just, wait for that point.
That's why in my head I'm trying to think of a way to conditionally give some approvals that we're not delaying, just with both window sizes and window lead times, how challenging that can be right now.
If we could get some approvals on some of the non-road facing windows, that would give us a really great start. And if you're saying, hey, our concern is really those front 2, that we could get some more information about what that would look like in real life, we could do that.
Yep.
The back, and especially the one on the north side where we could start moving on a kitchen and just understand what we're gonna do for a plan, those ones would really help us get moving.
Yep.
Anna, can you go to the south elevation
Yes.
or the south windows that are proposed?
Would you like to see them individually or on?
The sheet that says what the dimensional opening is now and what's being planned.
All right, here they are.
So
Right. The south facing ones. We have one as 9 and then one as 10.
So let's look at 9 real quick. So that's currently 40.5 by 52. Okay, and then 10. So this is like the size of that double hung egress one. I bet if you got 30 by 68 or thereabouts for both 9 and 10, they would be the proportion of 10 and they would match. And the reason I'm wondering about the south side is it's not technically street facing, but it is, because there's nothing to
Until
your south
someone
side.
builds, yeah. or
Right,
something
you're
like-
right.
Yeah, yeah.
But those ones, I think, would you be interested in kind of pursuing that 30 and a half by 68 kind of existing size, or is there a reason on the inside or any other reason why that size wouldn't be appealing to you?
We can do it. It goes, it touches the ceiling right now, and we are just a little concerned as we get into it that we might have to bring that ceiling down just a little bit
Ah,
Oh,
with
it's-
materials, and we'll be covering that.
At 68, it touches the ceiling?
Yeah, it's right on the top, which is why partially when you see on 10.
Yeah, the
they
board
covered
across the top?
Yeah, they ran the board across the top and did some awkward stuff on that one.
So is that,
I think we could make it work. We'll just have to be we'll have to figure out what's gonna happen with the ceiling on the inside to make sure we're not covering any window.
is that current 30 inches by 68 inches, is that 68 inches the actual window or the opening? Like with that header?
That's the window.
The window?
Yeah.
Okay. So with that 54 inch, you'd be going a foot smaller than the window shown even, right? If I'm
Yeah.
reading that
When-
correct?
When you say window, I'm talking like casement to casement, right? Not just the glass, right? The whole
Yep.
window slot.
Yep, but you're not counting
Yeah.
that
That board at
boarded
the top.
over
No,
section.
we're not. We're proposing kind of going down to what window 9 looks like now.
Yeah.
A shorter window.
yeah, I would really encourage you to go taller than 9.
Okay.
But can you go lower? Can you drop the sill? Or is that a different headache?
We can, it will add some more to it, we can. I think if we were gonna pick, if we wanted to go lower or higher, we would rather go tight up to the ceiling.
Tight up to
It'll- Yeah, it just won't have any trim on it, and we can make that work better than taking, because you lose so much wall space. You'll have furniture right in front of the window
I
and different
see.
things like that if we go much lower.
So there is probably a middle ground, right? Because on 10, you've got a very vertical looking window, but your new proposal is a very squat 36 and a half by 54, which is even more squat than the 36 by 60 egress double hung, which is the window. That's a very common, everybody has that window.
Yeah,
So like there's got to be a middle ground in there, I would think, where you could still be taller than 54 but not create headaches for yourself, and not as wide as 36 and a half if you can stand to
okay,
be narrow still.
yeah. So you're saying, you're recommending stay within that 30 and a half inch window and get at least taller than 54, so somewhere in between 54 and
Kinda, yeah, that's
Yeah.
what,
and 68.
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
So currently, the existing window without that header thing is bumping up against the ceiling on
Mhm.
the inside of the house?
Yeah,
But the original window you think was actually even taller than that, right? I mean, you're thinking that decorative thing was really just a filler,
It-
not actual window?
it is a window that they just covered. So there is still window above it, like you can reach your hand behind it and tap on the window. So the
Oh,
window
so
is still
it's-
there.
It's that window that goes all the way to
Yeah.
the ceiling,
That one goes all
not the
the way up.
visual window that we're seeing from the
Yeah.
outside, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's why, so it's
Okay.
the inside measurement, well,
Yes.
Yeah, okay,
I
Yeah.
know what you were asking, okay, yes, okay.
It's
Now-
like a valence.
yeah.
Yeah, it is like an
Yes.
exterior valance.
I think when they shrunk the window next to it, they felt like they had to shrink this one a little bit to
Mhm.
for the look.
Wow.
So they added a wider valance on top, which there's no window behind that one, so.
Gotcha, okay. What things people do.
Yeah,
Just say,
like
can you
Washington
imagine like
School.
what went on, yeah, like, let's just put a piece of wood over the window.
Well, I think that house has been a rental forever, and I
Yeah.
think it was just
Yeah, they do.
duct taped together
Mhm.
over the course of these years.
Yeah,
sorry to bring up another thing, but the porch windows, do you have any plans for those currently, or is that going to be separate? I don't think I saw anything.
The porch windows,
Yeah.
we keep the same
You're gonna
size
keep
and just
those for
match with the
now
new
and-
windows. Yep.
Perfect.
Is there a plan to build that porch out and make it usable space, or are you gonna continue to use it as a porch?
We're gonna continue as a porch. The ceiling is too low in
Too
there
low.
to make it any, it would be nice if we could have, but
Yeah,
I don't
right.
think we can. Not unless we change the roof line, which is just a whole nother story for this small of a house.
Yep.
I think the porch is what will look the best with new windows in it. That one is really, we put the old ones up to keep the snow out this winter, and it makes it look really great. I think if what I was mentioning, that we could get going on some of the back windows, we can, I think obviously we can make something work, whether it's a custom window or something that doesn't match the size. I'm wondering if there's like, if it's 68, if we at least get above 60 inches, we would say, hey, the south side are good as long as we get above 60 and stay in that 30-inch width window. I would be great. That would be great. We can figure that out.
I think Nick's right. You're going to be a lot happier with a vertical window versus a horizontal.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on any of the other windows? Same conversation, try and keep them as tall and as we can.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably less of a priority on your kitchen wall. There's kind of just a hodgepodge there, and
It is, yeah.
it can be whatever it needs to be probably, but that other side, I think, like you said, that game plan sounds good of trying to find something that's taller,
Taller
that's
than
short,
60, yeah.
shy of 68, but in that,
Yeah,
and still 2'6". The only unknowns look at how vertical number 8 is. Like that's a
Mhm.
good example of
mhm.
kind of the spirit of the house that's still here in places.
Yeah, number 8 is what 10 originally looked like
Yeah.
before they put the wood in
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, exactly. The only unknown that I have is the front side. Just I don't know if I'm ready to vote on the front because there's so many unknowns.
Yeah.
But I feel more comfortable trying to give some things for you to work on and make progress on
Mhm.
relative to the kitchen wall and maybe the south wall in the back and the siding and things like that. But I just have lingering concerns about what comes from the front
front.
side. Yeah,
Specifically the upper windows or the lower ones? as
yeah,
well?
the upper windows.
Yeah, that's why I'm trying to think if there's a way that we can approve a certain size or proportion or something to like keep him moving.
I just don't think
But you think
without
we need some more
studying it we'll
exploration
know.
and a return.
I just don't. Yeah, it'll just be hard to picture it with different opening sizes and proportions.
So we could approve basically effectively 3 sides of the house with a pause and a return on once you've sort of noodled on what you want to do for that upstairs. Now
Okay.
that we've had some dialogue about it,
Yeah.
that could give you a start.
That would be great. And then I would come back with probably engineer drawings will be the easiest. So they're to scale and we can actually see what's going on.
And then you'd get an idea of what's going to give you that symmetry or asymmetry that you're looking for
Yeah.
in doing your home.
Hmm.
And, if you were to decide to put forward this escape window product to see if it gets approved, like you'd probably have to come back to do that. That's
Yep.
your decision, but
Yeah.
like this might be an opportunity for you to look at that product and see if it's a good fit to try to get it approved.
Okay.
And again, the house is non-contributing, so that's just something to keep in mind as we're going through the process, which I know you all are.
So I'm relatively new to the group. What is non-contributing?
So non-contributing is a designation, that's given to properties, in our case, when they were originally surveyed. So in the historic district that this home is a part of, that was in the first National Register historic district that was established in Holland. And so non-contributing means it has usually features that not or no longer appropriate basically to the historic character of the neighborhood, of the surrounding homes, of the house that's held, the house itself. So changes have been made. That there's other things that can come into play as well, but usually that's the decision that was made by the folks who were doing the surveying back in the 80s. Some homes were marked non-contributing because they had, new alternative siding, they had replacement windows, they had additions put on, and the home no longer looks like what it would have historically.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So Anna, I'm going to suggest we break this up into 3. That's usually,
I think that sounds like a good plan.
So I think we should tackle the window one first. And I don't know if there are any additional questions. I think we're trying to figure out how to give you a place to start.
Well, and the one other question is it's aluminum clad, right? Is what's
Yeah.
being proposed.
Yeah.
So is that something we need to try to
Discuss.
be consistent on?
I knew I had read aluminum clad somewhere.
Mhm.
Just I was on the wrong house.
All right, is it easier to discuss the siding first? So I'm unable to make any sort of motion.
I want to move on the windows, but there's just so many specific conditional things that I don't know if I'm comfortable making a motion that encompasses all of that complexity on the window issues. And
Do we need to talk about
What exactly?
materiality with the windows?
I would be more comfortable voting for something with a Fibrex or equivalent than an aluminum clad. I mean, we try to steer applications away from aluminum clad. Is that correct?
Yeah, in the guidelines, it explains that all alternative materials are open for discussion and reviewed on a case-by-case basis. Yeah. Wood and Fibrex being preferred.
Right.
Wood and Fibrex are preferred, but vinyl and
Fi-
aluminum might be on the table on a case-by-case basis.
Case-by-case, not setting precedent.
All right.
Right, because no house sets a precedent for another.
Okay.
So,
yeah. One thing I'm struggling with the Fibrex is some of the entry lines to Fibrex, like the Anderson 100s, really look like a vinyl window from the outside. They're usually pretty thick trim, it's whereas you can get an aluminum clad window that has a lot of a more historical look to it from the outside. So in my mind, are we trading off materiality for aesthetic? And there's instances where I would prefer the look of the aluminum clad one to a Fibrex just from the curb appeal aspect of it.
so we need to discuss then whether I mean, we've had, like, the window schedule is one thing, but we need to discuss whether, from a material standpoint on this home, knowing that no house sets precedent, if we are okay with aluminum clad on the outside wood interior. My 2 cents, and again, I can't make a motion, but my 2 cents in this case is that on this particular home, I would be okay with an aluminum clad with a wood interior, but that's, I mean, someone challenge me if they, let's have a discussion about it if they feel differently.
Well, there's a significant improvement in the siding happening at the same time, so, you know, it makes sense to, you know, in terms of compromise, the case could be made, especially given Justin's comment for him looking at some Fibrex versus aluminum and favoring the aluminum.
And I think this is a perfect example of why no home sets precedent for the others.
Would we want the return trip for the front windows? Do we also want the south-facing windows to be part of that revisit?
For the south windows, haven't we given enough examples of what would be approved that we should be able to move forward with that, even with the aluminum clad?
If we are suggesting anything, it does need to be specifically noted in the motion.
Okay.
Because otherwise what I'm approving is what he suggested, and our
Okay.
suggestions and options.
Okay.
That's where I see you having trouble to craft the motion, because you're running into
That's where my
things.
head is right now.
Right.
I
That's
think-
what I'm struggling with.
I think we should hold off on the south side and the west side, and then you can pick that proportion that we talked about for those, and that I think that would be easier for us to craft the motion, because then we can just do it by side of the house.
I agree. All right. All right, in that case, then I will move to approve the application for a certificate of appropriateness as submitted and per testimony for just the windows on the north and east elevations at 303 Pine Avenue based on the local guidelines and Secretaries of Interior Standard Number 9. New additions, exterior alterations, or related new construction will not destroy historic materials, features, and spatial relationships that characterize the property. The new work will be differentiated from the old and will be compatible with the historic materials, features, size, scale, proportion, and massing to protect the integrity of the property and its environment. And we are requesting that the homeowner return with some other possible options for the west and south facing windows.
Do you want to comment on window? Well, I guess the ask is aluminum clad, so, okay.
Yep.
I'll second the motion.
Any comments before we put it to a vote? Okay, so all those in favor of approving the COA as stated, say yes.
Yes.
All those opposed say no. I also say yes, so COA passes. So we at least got you two sides of the
Thank
house
you.
when it comes to windows. So let's move on into the siding discussion then.
So I think the siding is ready.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll make a motion. All right, I need the motion in front of me. I'll make a motion to approve the application for certificate of appropriateness as submitted per testimony for 303 Pine Avenue, based on local guidelines and Secretary for Interior Standard number 9. And with the stipulation that this is just for the siding aspect of the application. Standard number 9 states that new additions, exterior alterations, or related new construction will not destroy historic materials, features, and spatial relationships that characterize the property. The new work will be differentiated from the old and will be compatible with the historic materials, features, size, scale, proportion, and massing to protect the integrity of the property and its environment.
Nick, do you want to include anything regarding the suggestion of a freeze board or skirt board as options, or?
Yes, my motion would include the requirement for corner boards and a freeze board. Not a skirt board. A skirt board would be optional, and the freeze board and the corner boards, can we seek administrative approval for those sizes? Okay,
Yeah, if we can,
that's
then
what I'd
yeah,
like.
that'd be great. So
Yep.
that,
Administrative approval for both the sizes of those.
which means that you can speak to, if a motion passes, then you can speak to Anna about getting
Okay.
those approved, but as you kind of
Yeah.
look at what you would like to do there, as opposed to needing to come back to us for those particular things. Does anyone,
I'll second.
okay. Any comments before we vote? All right, all those in favor say yes.
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 All those opposed say no. I also say yes, so the COA for the siding with stipulations that Nick suggested passes. 2 out of 3. So then third is the stairs.
I'm ready to make a motion on the stairs. Let's see. I move to approve an application for the certificate of appropriateness as submitted for testimony for the project at, what's the address again?
3 Pine.
303 Pine?
Mhm.
Okay. Avenue, for rebuilding the stairs, using like material or the existing portion of the stairs, with a stipulation that if a different direction is desired for the stairs, like using the original brick, that would have to come back for a second approval. And this approval will be based on local guidelines and the Secretary of Standards Interior number 9, which says that new additions, exterior alterations, or related new construction will not destroy the historic materials, features, and spatial relationships that characterize the property. That new work will be differentiated from the old and will be compatible with historic materials, features, and the scale, proportion, and massing of to protect the integrity of the property and its environment.
I'll second.
Any comments before we vote? Okay, all those in favor say yes.
Yes.
All those,
Yes.
sorry, Nick. All those opposed say no. Okay, I also say yes to the motion for the stairs passes.
Thanks, Paul.
So, thank you for answering all of our questions and going
Yeah.
through the process.
No,
It's,
I appreciate
this
the
is, this, and thank you. This
Yeah.
is a huge undertaking on this home,
Yeah.
and it'll be great to see it restored to a little
Yeah.
more historical than it currently looks. So, thank you. We know it's an
Yeah.
investment in time and energy and financial, so
Yep.
we appreciate it.
Thank you for the time.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Up next is concept proposal for the city greenhouses at 496 Central Avenue.
Hello.
Hello.
How is everybody? Thanks for having us tonight.
Good.
You want to give a
Yes.
preview quick?
I would
Sweet.
like to. Thank you. So, Andy Kenyon and Jamie Scott are with us tonight from the Department of Parks and Recreation here at the city to present their concept proposal for the relocation of the city greenhouses. There are just a few things I want to clarify before the discussion starts tonight. What the HDC will be considering is just the proposal to remove the greenhouse into Centennial Park. So that's sort of the scope of this discussion before you tonight, is open for discussion on if this is an appropriate placement for this portion of the greenhouse. The other half of this story is the greenhouses on location at State Street and Central. That decision on what happens there will be made by City Council and informed by a report put together by a study committee, which has not been appointed or put together yet, but is potentially sort of one of the next steps in this process. So while that decision will not be made by the HDC, it's being made sort of by another committee. I just wanted to make that clear because we've been talking about this for a very long time, and sort of figuring out exactly how we achieve this process has been what I've been focusing on the past few weeks. So I just wanted to make that clear. I'm happy to answer any questions about it. But so that's what we're here to discuss tonight, is what Jamie and Andy have for us on the greenhouse moving into Centennial Park. And I can keep explaining, or you're welcome to take over here again. I just want to make sure that that's clear. Are there any questions from my commissioners about that at all? I know it's a little tricky to wrap your head around at first.
So the committee that'll be looking at what happens there will not be informed by the HDC?
Good question. It might include HDC members. We still need to look at that. I don't know, are you thinking like a discussion, can you explain what your I'm sorry.
As a historic property, normally the HDC would help guide decisions that are made about the property, but it sounds like there will be a third.
A third sort of, again, the study committee, it's as if, it's because the greenhouse is its own historic district. That's how the HDC is involved in the first place. So it's the same process as if a new historic district was going to be established, or in this case, it's modifying an old one. So I completely understand what you're saying. That's what, if it was a COA, that would be where the HDC would become involved. But for the establishment or the modifying of a district, a new study committee is appointed.
So it's really not about the greenhouse then. It'll be about the greenhouse it'll be about that particular district.
Exactly, yes. So the sort of the future of that district. Yeah, I know.
No, okay, cool.
Perfect. Well, thanks for having us, and thanks, Anna, for the intro. As you recall, we came about a month ago to your last meeting and discussed, or maybe it was 2 months ago, and discussed this project a little bit to get some direction on where to go next. We're looking at this as probably step 2 of probably 4 or 5 steps in the next year or so to go through to get this actually to happen. At the last meeting, it was requested to kind of come back with a little bit more of a plan or a conceptual idea of what this might look like and where we might want to put it in the park. So that's what we did today, or over the course of the last month. Jamie, you can see one of the drawings there that Anna's blowing up is just a conceptual sketch of where it might land in the park, and it is drawn to scale. We plunked it where it was, facing the direction it was, not completely arbitrary, but that's up for discussion. What we were thinking on this is that front of the 27 by 27 piece of the building with the arbor in the front facing 12th Street creates a nice backdrop for the park for photographs and things like that, since that's one of the most popular places to take pictures in it currently. This kind of location also goes back to our discussion last time about the management proposal or management plan for the park developed by MKSK on where that might land in the park. And this is that general area. They kind of had it up a little bit to the north on this particular page. But when we were talking about it as staff and with our parks commissioners, that particular spot they landed on next to the pond was a bit busy, and quite honestly, we'll need a lot more extensive modifications to that area to make it work, and quite expensive actually. So we looked at the open area to the east of the Osbook and to the south of the pond to put that there. It's really close, and we think it's a pretty appropriate spot to put it. And we are looking at the 27 by 27 piece of that structure, the tall tropical house. Our drawing and then the photoshopped picture of it there does show the glass. We're planning to have that just be a skeleton with no glass, and just be there for photo ops, for small events. We'd probably light the inside of it with some kind of decorative lighting so it looks really nice in the evening times and nighttime, adding sidewalks and landscaping all around it. So that's just a concept. Jamie, add anything? Did I miss anything?
Everything's in there. You know, the location of that particular greenhouse in the southeast corner of the park is largely devoid of large trees. And so placing that type of structure in there to kind of frame and fit that area, and then planting almost a sub-canopy of smaller trees around it to actually make it fit, and then also to actually kind of bring the other 3/4 of the park and its canopy together with that will almost kind of complete the space, I think, without overshadowing it. So in 10 to 20 years, you know, with dogwoods or redbuds or whatever might fit the bill, you're not going to have 120-foot canopy trees overpowering it. You're going to have a landscape that almost complements it and fits it into the park really nice.
Would you just like pea gravel the inside of the area or something, however you were planning on using it?
You know, I think conceptually there's a lot of different options you could do. You know, in the overhead scale drawing, just that concept, you could have pavers that go up to it and then pavers that go on the inside. I definitely see that particular area of the park as being another area of respite where people could go and sit and reflect, much like the gazebo or any of the benches that we have. We could easily landscape the inside of that with potted tropicals, almost kind of bringing that concept of the Centennial Park greenhouse back to its original roots. So we could put banana plants, and we could put tropicals in there. That was originally the original intent of the building. So.
And also used to house the tropical plants that used to go into the park
Yes.
before we had the big
Yes.
storm.
Yep.
You're not planning on planting and trellising the actual skeleton frame, are you?
I don't think not at this time we're not. Yeah.
No, it's a lot
I know
of
that's,
maintenance.
you're not in favor of that
Yeah.
because we've
Yes.
talked about it,
Yeah, I think it's gonna add a lot of undue weight to the structure and quite honestly hide the overall architecture of the building. So I don't
I know
see
it's-
that happening.
It's been suggested a few times, but
Sure.
I know you weren't,
I
in
wasn't-
your expertise, you were not in favor
I
of it.
wasn't in favor of it from the labor standpoint of the
Yeah.
amount of work it would take to actually maintain the plants on the trellis. If I was willing to entertain that sort of weight on that trellis system, I'd actually put tempered glass in.
Yeah,
But because the structure itself will not support that, we're just gonna leave it as a skeleton and leave it be.
I'd
You know, if
say,
there's-
sorry.
sorry.
Go ahead.
I'm like,
Yeah, you're fine.
Um,
Yeah, that's how we are too.
I know, it's like, ooh, all the options.
Yeah, yes.
Yes.
So would there be any consideration for running snow melt?
Yeah, for sure, and that's actually what I was gonna say. You mentioned sidewalks and pea
Yeah.
gravel, and one thing through that MKSK plan was they were very intrigued, and we are too, about the possibility of extending that into the park to some degree. And this offers a great opportunity, if we can afford it and do it, to do that, to make that connection, and even cross through the park potentially. You know, at a dream scale would be great to do. So, I don't know, that would be, I think ultimately, I think that's what we would love to do there. That'd be really neat. So it would offer it up to as an opportunity to use that space in the wintertime, which we currently don't snowplow or anything in Centennial Park, so that'd be kind of cool.
It's great because people use, I mean, you go out there after a snowfall and you can see how foot traffic has cut through
Used it,
the
yeah.
park. So
Yep.
there's clearly a desire.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, why don't we plow the park?
The
Pavers.
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 It'll damage 'em?
We
Yeah.
destroy
Oh,
them,
yeah.
yeah. We did that by accident on 8th Street 10 years ago, and it wrecked a bunch, so we tend not to try to do that.
The way the pavers were installed, back in the day, the edging, the restraint system, typical paver installations today have a hidden restraint system that's buried below the turf. If you go into the park and look, you have an
right
exposed
up.
restraint system, and it would take seconds.
A split second.
A split second for a snowplow to actually grab one of those steel edging and just rip it all the way up, and we'd have
Yeah.
a huge mess on our hands, so, yeah.
Yeah, so we're looking for some direction on a concept and approval for that, because the next step would be for us to hire somebody to help us wrap our heads around the cost of moving this piece, adding structural steel on the sides of it, because right now, if you think about where it is in the current state, there's no from ceiling to floor, or roof to floor, I guess, on half of it.
Right, and it's
So-
also got those glass pieces that where the sidewalls butt into it. The
Yep.
glass pieces that are kind of on a boomerang shape, for lack of, yeah.
Yep, correct. So, yeah, we'd have to extend those down and hire somebody to help us come up with a plan to do that, and to start getting a number together. We do have a pretty substantial proposed budget in the MCIF, Municipal Capital Improvement Fund, in about a year to spend money on this project. So I'd like to work from now till then to do that.
Would you ever think about the tempered glass?
Yeah, we did. We
I
talked
think
around.
about like Four Season,
Yeah.
kind of, and I know we talked about security and safety and other things, but I just,
Yeah, I wouldn't say that's necessarily off the table, but we've kind of come full circle with that. We talked about glass initially, and the amount of work and effort and maybe support it would take to support that weight from that glass. We're not sure what that would be, so I guess I don't think it's off the table, but
It's not, but then at the same time, what modifications do you have to do to the structure, and how do you not impact its historical significance?
yeah.
So, I'm open to anything. I don't know about a functioning greenhouse.
Yeah.
But just having something that's enclosed, it's a possibility.
Andy,
Yep,
so it's exposed to the elements.
correct.
In the wintertime, in the summertime, in the spring, is there access through it? Do people walk through it year-round?
Yeah, that's what we're envisioning, yeah.
because the
If-
doors would be gone.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, we'd probably have the front, we'd probably keep that front vestibule, I don't know, that's what I'm thinking, looking the same way, and maybe those doors are propped open, but yes, you would absolutely be able to enter it and exit it, walk through it, exactly like Jamie said, much like the gazebo at the north end of the park, where you can access that anytime you'd like. Especially if we had snow melt through that little bit of sidewalk, it'd be pretty cool.
But there's no, whatever snow falls, it falls inside this facility.
Correct. Another reason to get the snow melt. So it would melt that off immediately, just like it does throughout the downtown corridor, and it would be dry most of the winter.
So is it your intention that in seasonality we're bringing certain things we put in there, or it's just an empty building and that's all it is?
Yeah, I think to Jamie's point about bringing in some tropicals in there, tropical plants in there during the summer months would be totally appropriate. And maybe I have no idea, but maybe it's some kind of Christmas tree thing that we do in the park. We used to do that many, many years ago, and maybe we do that again, and you bring that and highlight that for the winter time, or you decorate it in such a way to show it off during the winter months.
Yep, like a simplistic tree, almost like a GDK park, just a
Yeah.
tree right in the middle of it, lit up, and just a focal point that kind of ties in with all the other lights on the trees around the park.
Yeah.
So the construction of the bottom of this thing, the knee wall,
Yep,
that's gonna have to be rebuilt,
correct.
and with the same kind of light material, it looks like a, kind of a cement plastered.
Yeah, yeah, we'd have to do something. I don't know exactly what that would be, but we would tie that into the discussion with the architect that would help us figure out how to move it there and reconstruct it there. So yeah, it would need some kind of foundation for that. And I think totally appropriate to have something similar to what we currently have. Yeah.
I want to ask a couple of questions about the site plan. But before we go off this picture, Anna, just looking at the scale of this and then looking at the rendering of the Photoshop greenhouse in the park, I'm just wondering if it's actually going to be a little bigger than it shows in there.
It probably will be.
Yeah, it will.
That's our
That looks
skill
like
at
a little
trying to
baby
put that in
version
there.
of what'll really be
Yeah.
there.
And there's a half truck inside of it, so don't look too closely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you're working with the Photoshop and the guys up in IT upstairs, I was kind of, bigger, smaller, wait, back,
So,
forward, backwards, so I was
A
doing
way to
lot of
do
that.
this would be to just take some little flaggies and take them out there and pace off 27 feet
Correct.
and then Photoshop it into that, take a picture of
But,
that.
Yeah, so,
And then set the
Stretch it.
corners to that,
it's a good idea.
because I just fear that this might be giving us a false impression of the impact of the greenhouse
Sure.
in this space. And I can't be sure because it's just like this weird visual
Yeah.
medium.
yep,
Yeah.
yep.
But if it's way off, then it turns out
Yeah.
that this is not really truthful,
Yeah.
right?
It's
So,
really conceptual.
Yeah.
Yeah.
okay,
would-
but there's an impression being made
Well,
and
and I would say it's not. I wouldn't say it's too far off. I mean, you can't really see it in this picture, but when we had it blown up, you can see kind of the fencing to the pond over to the left in the picture to the west, and I don't know. It's close. It's
it's
not
like
perfect.
3 mouse clicks plus a walk across the street with the flags. So I would just
Yeah, we can
ask that we
Sure.
could maybe
Yeah,
dial that in a little
we
bit.
can do that.
But relative to the site plan, I'm just wondering, just given the landscape design traditions that are present in this park, and given that a lot of times in landscape, there are certain landscape traditions which actually use ruins and garden follies in the way that you're kind of talking about. And they tend to be really kind of flowy and organic, and there's some flowiness happening in the park, especially with what MKSK is proposing on the west side of this same lower quadrant. And so might it relax the presence of the greenhouse just a little bit, just to knock it off of this orthogonal
Yeah.
grid a little bit? Right now, it's just really belonging to the street grid.
Yeah, we talked about that today. In fact, we had a Parks and Rec Commission meeting earlier tonight,
Okay.
and that got brought up to kind of angle that to face, I don't even know what direction, face northeast a little bit, turn it a little bit a different direction so it doesn't line up just like that perpendicularly.
Yeah, this is, so
Yeah,
as a
Yep.
person with an engineering degree,
yeah,
I'm going to say that this is like what an engineer would do,
yeah,
right? They would just plunk it down, orthogonal, very logical.
yeah.
It might just be a little bit more romantic if it's just tweaked
Angled?
just a touch.
Sure.
And buildings like this can be really beautiful as when they're seen from an angle as opposed to just directly straight on.
Sure.
So, and there's really nothing else in the park other than the War Memorial that terminates 11th that's really responding to like that intensity of the orthogonal street grid.
Yeah.
The other question is just like this site plan does a pretty good job of making 2 fronts out of this building, where you've got the portico that's facing 12th Street, and then there's an entrance out the back of the greenhouse, but it's actually the north side of the greenhouse, and there's a whole front to be experienced on that side. And that's something that I think would want to come in front of the Historic District Commission too, once there's an architect
Sure,
involved, to explore what does that front look like. Is there
yeah,
more trellising that pokes out that side? Is there a pergola? Is there,
sure,
because it shouldn't be just like an afterthought,
right. No, I.
because it's addressing the public space inside the park.
It's a very, very good point, and it offers up another perspective for photography and other things, and in using that space, not only from making it look nice, but from a usability space. I think that
Yeah.
it makes total sense.
I
And
think the backside should look just as nice as the front side.
Yeah.
or there is not a
Or there's not
backside,
Yeah.
Yeah.
right?
It's just-
Because
Yeah.
objects that are freestanding in the park, like the gazebo, for instance, doesn't really have a back because it's kind of a round
Right.
object, right? And so the things that have backs actually are maybe less successful, right? The book,
Yeah,
right? There's sort of like decidedly a back to that, and the space behind it isn't as appealing to us.
sure,
The War Memorial similarly doesn't really have a whole lot going on directly behind it, and that's because those objects have directionality to them in a space that doesn't really call for that kind of directionality.
Yeah, very good comments, Nick, thanks. And I think that's kind of the next, that's like what we want to do with the next part, the next step after we have that contractor under contract to look at that and to just do just what you said, so, yeah. Anything else? Did I miss anything, Anna?
I don't think so. Again, just I guess to kind of explain a little bit, the idea right now is that this would be sort of you all approving the idea of this happening, and then after it's able to get rolling, that's when the COA process would start. Again, we've kind of talked a little bit about this before. This is also reflected in the motion because, again, this isn't like a typical application that we would receive. Oh, went the wrong way. So I guess that's something else to consider, and if there's anything you would want to see more defined before giving conceptual approval, that's also a possibility as well. Here we go.
So does our conceptual approval relinquish its historical designation?
No. That it would have to be a separate decision that's made.
To be decommissioned as a historical
Right.
property versus, because we'll have decisions to be, well, we have decisions to be made about the greenhouse, but we won't be making the decisions about the property.
No.
Okay.
Yes, so this again falls under the HDC not only because it's the greenhouse property, but because it's being moved to Centennial Park, which is within the Holland Historic District. And so that perspective is what's going to prompt the COAs, not as much the taking a portion of the greenhouse. Again, that will all be determined by this other study committee, but for the process right now, if that were to go forward and to be approved, it would then come to you in Centennial Park. I think I might have made that more confusing, but
Well, because anything with trying to choose my words carefully. So, anything with a foundation is considered a structure, so therefore we would be weighing in, giving an opinion,
yes.
whatever. along
Yes,
with it.
and it's a sort of a prominent feature within, it would become a prominent feature within the park.
Okay, I just have to say it, even though we didn't with the Oz book.
Yeah, because the landscape elements tend not to come before us because they're historical or cultural landscapes and we don't have scope over that.
I see. No, this would have a foundation. It would be a building.
A structure.
A structure.
And you're kind of taking us out of the
Jay's laughing
equation
at me.
so that we don't have to contemplate a notice to proceed over at State Street,
Yes.
which was what we were going to have to contemplate at some point.
Right.
Yes.
What is exactly the purview of this study committee, and what expertise are you looking for from that group that wouldn't be kind of sitting around this dais?
Absolutely. So it is in the PA 169, which is what establishes historic districts within the state of Michigan. That's the sort of statute that we're following with this. And within that, it lists what is needed to, again, create a historic district or modify a historic district, which in this case it would be a modifying. And for the committee, so it's Act 169 of 1970, 399.203 is the section. And I'm trying to see here. So it says the committee shall contain a majority of persons who have clearly demonstrated interest or knowledge of historic preservation and shall contain contain representation from one or more duly organized local historic preservation organization. So again, I see the HDC commissioners being involved in this, but there's other people who would have interest as well that we need to consider. And again, this isn't something that we know it's a possibility, but we haven't started with steps forward yet to form the committee or start to look for members. It's just sort of the next step that would need to happen in order to get the greenhouse to a place where it would be going to Centennial Park.
So what this requires a modification to the historic district because of the specific act of taking a historic element and bringing it into a district. Is that what's triggering this?
So what's triggering it is that the greenhouse is the key, is the historic feature within that district. And so by removing part of it, you are going to be modifying that district. And that's why a study committee needs to be formed in order to do a report and see if it matches what's laid out in the statute as being able to happen. So there are certain criteria that have to be met first.
Okay, so you're talking about, the concern here is more about the property from which we're taking the greenhouse and bringing it, as opposed to worrying about bringing it into Centennial Park.
Absolutely, yes.
So that facility was deemed a historic property.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember that being part of a specific historic district.
It's
It's own.
So once we remove, yeah.
Yes.
It's
Once,
not an island, literally.
yeah, it is. So once we remove what is the historic property on the piece of land, then its the historical significance of the land is deemed to be less than, which is why there would be a modification to that district.
I guess I don't understand why we have to go through that. I mean, it sounds like it's a charter thing or it's a state thing. To be a historic district, you got rules to follow.
Because somebody would like to use it for something else perhaps, and and otherwise they would, whoever would like to use it for something else other than the piece of land would need to come before the HDC for a COA to use that piece of land for something else.
And to destroy all of the other fragments of the greenhouse would require something called a notice to proceed, which has a very strict criteria that would be difficult for us to step through.
Yeah. But I would think there'd be several people involved in that
Yeah.
group. Okay, all right, good, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, so next steps.
Next steps are, if you're comfortable with what's been presented today as a conceptual plan, I do have drafted motion language that has been provided by the city attorney who we've been consulting with just to make sure we're doing this correctly. I'll just quickly review it again because it's not one of our normal procedures, but the motion will approve the concept plan and acknowledge that it is a concept plan, it is not a COA. That's just to make sure it's clear and on the record. If there's any additional information you want to see or changes, sort of like the conditions in a COA, you may include that as well. And then, again, clearly indicate that the approval of the motion is not an approval for a notice to proceed or a COA, and that final plans need to be brought before the HDC. So this very much mirrors a lot of the discussions we've been having. Are there any questions about that?
So it might sound like hair splitting, but thanks for letting us go through the exercise.
You guys are
Yeah.
doing great work, so.
By conceptually approving what's been presented to us in terms of moving it into Centennial Park,
Mhm.
aren't we then also conceptually approving our willingness to piecemeal or parse out the sections of the greenhouse? I mean, I just want to be clear what we're
Yeah.
agreeing to. But and I understand it's conceptual, but I just want to be clear what it is that we're conceptually agreeing to.
Yes. I'm gonna say yes because it would be the next step that would be, acted on.
I think now would be the appropriate time. I mean, if you want them to look at, say if it's something more than just 27 by 27, I mean, any other ideas you want them to potentially look at, now would be the time to say, hey, can you consider this, come back at another date. But yeah, I would agree with Anna. I think that you're not giving final approval far from them, but
Oh, no.
yes, you are giving them a direction to proceed.
And there have been so many great, from the community, like exercises that we have gone through over the past, I don't know how many years, sort of going through this process of contemplating, looking at different spots within the city, out at Windmill Island, at different places. I mean, there's been a lot of deep thought that has gone into this. So I don't want to diminish that because I know it's been years of effort and work and lots of, I'd say, people being really open to brainstorming, which has been great to be able to be a part of. But I just want to make sure that we know that if we are agreeing in concept, that we are agreeing to dividing up the greenhouses,
Mhm.
and only taking the tall portion of the Victorian house and not the two wings on either side.
There's another concern that I've had that I guess, I don't know when the right time would be to bring it up or what the right arena would be. But once we vacate State Street and it's no longer historic and it no longer has greenhouses on it, we've changed how the city is a neighbor to those residences around it, right? So we talk sometimes about like, hey, when you're in a historic district, your property value benefits from that. And here's just a few, but a few neighbors who actually live near this historic district. They're not in it, but they're near it. They might be across the street from it and so on. Is the city thinking ahead to, once this is a blank slate of a parcel again, what uses may not be allowable on it based on what's in the UDO and what's being contemplated from a future site plan development standpoint, to make sure that the people who have bought into this neighborhood don't eventually end up living across the street from just a parking lot? Because right now what's protecting them against living across the street from just a parking lot is that
Sure.
there's that pesky greenhouse there that's
Yeah.
preventing that.
Yep.
And that's a real thing, is like when you buy a property across the street from a public amenity, and then I'll give you an example. The Aquatic Center used to have lots of green space. It wasn't technically a park, but it was green space. And people bought there across from green space, and then it became a parking lot one day. And so I'm bringing this up because how can this be thought of in the future?
Yeah, so I will attempt to answer that, and I'm going to lean on Mark a little bit too, because I don't think once that happens, we don't have any way to control that. Correct? Like if this happens and the land goes back to nothing, if it's just grass, imagine the greenhouses not being on there. It harkens back to the Evergreen Commons conversation years and years ago about it wasn't a land swap, but I'm going to get the terminology wrong.
Memorandum of Understanding.
Yes, it goes all the way back to that. And so you can think back to what they had initially talked about doing with that space. But I think, if it switches hands, I don't think the city has any
Why
say,
can't the
right?
city impose a
Right?
deed restriction on it, but in the process of delisting it?
I don't know.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, as a baseline, if it's, it's just turf grass there, then.
Yeah.
It would just revert back to the underlying zoning.
Yeah.
And it's probably, I don't know, TNR district there, or whatever it is. So, I mean, whatever the underlying zone district would allow, you know, anybody, whoever gains ownership of it could do that, okay? But yeah, I mean, I guess I would grant you, there's nothing that would say that, putting a deed restriction on the property would be illegal. The city could do that. City council could elect to do that. Would they be willing to do that? I don't know. That would be something for city council to decide.
It could emerge as a recommendation of this study committee, potentially.
A lot of things could come out of that study committee for things of
What
that
to do with
nature.
it.
Yeah, you start factoring in neighbors and et cetera, but I mean, we don't, you kinda have to go through that process to fully understand.
Who's gonna own this property when we're done?
That's a good question.
Well, my understanding was that we were gonna, that Evergreen Commons ultimately wanted to have that property.
I understand that, well, there.
Yep,
yeah,
I think
sorry.
that's right.
I think there is this MOU, but I don't know for sure if that's still legally binding
Yeah,
or if it's not.
we have to resurrect that a little bit and,
Yeah.
and look back into that, dust it
Dust it
off.
off.
Yeah. So, yeah,
Well, that's an important little bitty right
Yep,
there. And
for
you're
sure.
raising a very good question.
Yeah, I just think we need to be really careful if we're gonna just step through eliminating a historic district and then ultimately end up with a parking lot. Now's the time to put that on the record that that wouldn't be a great outcome for that site,
Well, and
in
if
my
it's
opinion.
if it's a committee, that, especially if it's a committee that hasn't maybe been involved in the past number of years as we've walked through all
Yeah.
of these options,
Yep.
that might, there's a catch-up period, right? For
Sure.
anybody who got, for anybody who got involved today, like
Yep.
even Kim, I'll use you as an example because you're newest to the commission. So the catch-up of just kind of the discussions that have taken place and all the thought that's been put into it, but also what a potential non-positive, at least that's my
Mhm.
opinion, outcome of that corner turning into a parking lot. I have that Paul Simon song going off in my head every time, every time I think about that. And then I also think about, to Nick's point, the homeowners across from there, the ones who see the greenhouse as a positive, but also the ones who see it as an eyesore. I'm gathering that a parking lot, if that were to happen, would probably, they'd really be wishing the greenhouse was back there, so.
And I think, to Jay's point, dust that MOU off, get the city attorney back involved, and so everybody on that committee could understand it and understand the ramifications of that.
Does
I
the
think that'd be
MOU
totally
Does the
appropriate.
MOU give limitations?
Offhand, I don't know.
I think the original, I think originally we thought, well, we don't need it anymore. They're thinking, well, we're gonna have classes of planting and we'll use that greenhouse as a way to do classes and have that be part of our programming.
Sure.
Some cool things. But I think then the reality set in of, okay, well, to use that the way you're talking about, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yeah, to retrofit it.
Because
Yeah.
of the condition.
Correct.
So I think the question at hand is, if the property reverts to Evergreen Commons, the idea of a parking lot is not so far-fetched. It would stay within the hands of the city. We talk about public art places, we talk about trying, it's kind of an entrance.
Mhm.
It feels like kind of an entrance to downtown Holland or River. We talk about finding places to put public art or something cool there. I mean, those are all legitimate conversations to be having right now, I think.
Yep, so maybe I speak out of turn, but maybe that's something that we should bring back to the group, and bring that back up, because
Yeah, we can do it.
it's been a number of years since that's been discussed.
Sure. I can tell you pretty much unequivocally too, so if the property is zoned residential, parking lots are not allowed as a principal use in a residential zone district, so that they would have to have some kind of a building on there for a parking lot to be accessory to.
That's helpful.
So,
And Evergreen Commons might have some great ideas that would fit well into what we're talking about right now. But
Mhm.
we just got,
We don't know.
there's greater discussion to be had. I think that's what we're learning right now.
Yep.
so.
So does that help?
I-
I mean, I don't
I think it helps to know
Yeah.
that that can't be
Yeah.
a primary use. And I mean, it's a triangle, right? So it's not gonna be the most useful parking lot.
It's a
Parcel.
very inefficient parking lot, yeah.
Yeah, very
But
broad space.
I think the concern needs to be in the conversation.
And it is really a gateway to downtown, and I think about how beautiful our landscaping is in the city, and it's such, that would be a lovely place for another, you know, to Jay's point, or to even the, you know, the Public Area Arts Commission was not even founded yet. I mean, that's relatively newer to the city in the past couple years, so that brings a whole other option, so.
Well, I think pursuant to the triangular parking and that land swap idea of this development down by Boatworks, that triangle is shown as a parking lot, and that, on that site plan, so, again,
way bigger.
you know, what's now green space. So,
May end up a
Well, that's
parking lot.
That's a good point.
Touche.
That space is way bigger. We take care of it. It's way bigger than the greenhouse space, FYI. You guys know that, but.
Yeah.
But that would be the primary use on that parcel.
So, I mean, with all of that too, I mean, we could be dealing with much different zoning, you know, so. It could be apples and oranges when you start talking about zoning.
Can I ask another question?
Please.
I'm gonna do the angel and devil thing here for a second. Okay, so, and this is, it is not meant to be loaded, but I think it's gonna sound that way, so I need to find a better way to say it. Does the city really find value in moving this greenhouse? I mean, I know it's a big expense. I know it will be I know it's gonna be an expensive venture.
Yeah.
Is it worth it to do this? Does it really fit into the master plan for Centennial Park? And you know that I am playing angel and devil because
Yeah,
you know how
yeah.
passionate I
Oh, yeah,
am
no,
about
yeah.
Centennial Park.
Yeah, so it is, as with anything that we do, I think there is a love-hate with a lot of stuff. And I agree, it's a hard one. I think the idea of having to retain the historic nature of what was done in the greenhouse and what it was done for Centennial Park is a great tie. And I think to tell that story again in Centennial Park with, you know, we imagine some kind of plaque or some kind of signage there that tells that, so that people can understand that this wasn't something that we just put in there, you know, and there's a reason for it. And we think that tie-in is good. Throughout many years of conversations with, you know, with Jamie and I, and then also with Bill Johnson and how that park flows, and then MKSK and the spot where we've decided to conceptually put it, that spot is really void right now of nothing. And green space is important to us and to me particularly, but I think that helps balance that whole area out quite well. And so I think from our perspective, having it kind of the conceptual plan that you've seen with no glass, with tasteful landscaping, with new sidewalks, I think is very easily maintained. When you throw glass, you throw other things into it, it complicates it and makes it more difficult. So from a operation standpoint, I think this is pretty low.
So you think the juice is worth the squeeze?
I do.
Because that's the other,
I think so here. I think the size that we've landed on is great. We did not like the idea of moving 3/4 of that all those structures around to different spots.
yeah.
It's a big footprint. It's clunky. This is probably, albeit not the most historic part of that house, obviously, you know, built 30 years after the first part was roughly. But it's, I think, the most attractive part of it from a lot of different perspectives, whether that's taking pictures or just using it. So, and you could argue with me on that, but I think that that's probably I don't know, does that make sense?
It does, and I think the argument for not moving it lends itself to another problem of it being an eyesore and
Yeah.
being a detraction to property value.
Yeah.
So it's a love-hate relationship, you know, I think when I bring it into Centennial Park, there's a certain sense of romance of bonding the two together because the greenhouse is serving the needs of Centennial Park. Now, if it stays there at that triangle piece, there's times I hate that building
Oh,
because I
yeah.
have to go in there and maintain it, and there's plastic all over the place, and it really is an eyesore. And so, you know, conceptually, we put a lot of work into this the past 2 years. What does it look like in another 2 years when we're still dealing with the greenhouse, and how does it look? Do we put the
Yeah.
money into it on the front side
Yeah.
and just somewhat maintain it, only to put lipstick on a pig and have to start the whole process over in 10 years?
But that's an argument that we hear on the Historic District Commission, which is that because maintenance is difficult, things are gonna go into decrepit state, and it's not really one that we should be using as an argument, I think.
It's reality, but
It
it's,
is, but
yeah.
it's also a vacant building.
Mhm.
Yeah.
You know, there's no function for it for us anymore at all. And that's the hard part.
That's true. Yeah, the die was sort of cast when we stopped using it as a greenhouse, which was a different decision-making process.
Yeah, we literally ran out of space,
Yep.
and
Yeah.
we needed much more room to do what we do.
So. So the ask is that we agree in concept to taking the center part of the tropical house and moving it into Centennial Park. Location roughly southeast corner.
Yes.
I feel like we're in irons here for anybody who's a sailor.
Is this kind of a head nod thing, or do you need a vote?
Well, I don't know,
Well, and
We
Takes
need
a vote.
We need a vote.
yeah.
You don't have to make a decision right now. You can option to table it and request more information, more time to think about it. But it is an action item.
so what are your next,
So at this point, it's just a conceptual approval, right? So I don't want to minimize what's happening here, but that's at this point what it is, which allows us then to go forward with figuring out what the cost is gonna be and hiring. I have to hire somebody to do this work, which could be $10,000 to $20,000, we're not sure, which is gonna take some time. And then at that time, when we get that consultant on board, we'll come back to you with a more detailed plan and drawing and a couple options with the location, how it's turned, or, to scale and everything else. And then can then tell you exactly how we're gonna make the structure function from the roof to the floor and all of that stuff.
right, and I understand that.
Yeah.
The burden is this, this conceptual agreement means that we all agree that, to kind of dice up the greenhouse the way it is, which that might be fine, that might not be, that's
Yeah.
kind
Yes.
of the thing.
It's a
I-
starting point.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is,
That's
yeah,
the-
we're at the edge now, right? Yep. So.
So what is this blank line here where it says if and then blank?
So that's if there's any additional information or changes to the concept plan that you would like to include. And so that you support the plan if, and it's sort of the conditions. So it could be that you just support the plan per testimony and as written, or if other conditions are met.
It's like the equivalent of having the freeze board on 303 Pine. I mean, that's my assumption.
Yeah.
Because the alternative is too, that city council could just decide to decommission the property and decommission the greenhouse.
That is a possibility.
Which could still happen,
Sure.
even if this
Yes.
motion carries.
Right. That's why I asked the question about, is it placating the, trying to weigh, because there's a big cost to the city involved too. Is it placating the desire of the people who find value in the greenhouse versus just, versus the difficulty that it creates for the city to maintain an empty building and one that's becoming decrepit?
Sure.
It's a tough one.
Yeah, because we're not just voting on the greenhouse, we're voting on the park.
Right,
The space that it leaves.
right.
But we're not tying ourselves to anything either. We're saying we agree to consider these options with what proposals come.
Well, it says we approve the concept plan.
Yeah.
So later, if a proposal was brought to us that had basically the concepts that we had approved, there wouldn't be any real logical basis to not approve it. Is that, I mean, is that the way? Like,
I think
if we
that's
said
the-
something like, okay, we'll only do it if there's glass in the greenhouse, then if they came back with a plan, no glass, we're not gonna do it, or maybe we'd change our minds. But if we say conceptually we approve this, but at the last minute we think, oh, we don't really want the greenhouse in the Centennial Park after all. I mean, I'm just trying to think of what road are we going down that we would then, would we reverse it, or I guess we can. We can do anything we want, right?
Well, we can, and anything that, but so could city council. They could
Yeah,
decide.
right,
Yeah,
we're
'cause
not the
it's
only
their-
actors in it, but
Yeah.
I'm just trying to think in my own mind, if I'm saying yes to it, do I agree with the whole concept, and it would really just be fine tuning okay, I want stucco on the base instead of cement, or, something
Or
like
block
that,
or
but,
whatever.
yeah.
Well, that's where the last phrase in this potential motion language says final plans must be brought to the HDC for approval before any changes can
Yeah.
be made. So I see that as where the architect
Yep.
and the landscape architects come in with paving and stucco and that
Sure.
And then you tear it apart.
that entrance that we talked
Honestly.
about to the north.
That was mean.
Sandy, wow.
Not, that was mean, but you know what I mean.
You're getting
That-
closer. You're
yeah.
making progress
Yeah,
here.
but
There you go. There you go.
So I think that's what that phrase is for, so
Yeah.
that we have still tear apart freedom.
There you go. I like it.
Right, but then we're dealing with not, are we gonna put the greenhouse in Centennial Park?
Yes.
We're dealing with what is the final product gonna
Yeah, I
look
think
like.
this is our saying it's going in the
Exactly,
park.
yeah,
We
yeah.
agree.
And
We
that's-
agree.
I just wanted to, that's kind of what I want to make sure.
Yeah, we
I'm-
agree this part is going in the park.
Yeah. Or the idea of it, yeah. I mean,
Yes,
yeah.
yeah.
Okay, no, that's good.
I'm inclined to make a motion, but I would also probably not read the part that says, from the information provided, the concept plan is generally consistent with the requirements and expectations of the historic district ordinance, because I don't know about that.
That's okay. That was language taken from, so a similar process was followed for the condo redevelopment at Washington School. And so that was part of that process. And so that's where that line of language came from.
Well, I would not, that was a contentious thing, and I don't like that language either. Generally consistent with the historic district, I'd leave that out. I mean, either it is or it isn't. It was generally consistent, I don't like that.
Well,
Yeah.
we generally don't decommission
Right.
or move homes, so
Yeah.
I generally don't agree with that statement either. But I think we can leave it, I mean,
Yeah.
we can leave it out.
I think that's, yeah, no, I think that's good. And thank you for mentioning it.
Okay, well, I'll just go ahead and make a motion then. The conceptual plan for partial relocation of the city greenhouse to Centennial Park located at 496 Central Avenue is not a complete application for a certificate of appropriateness. Approval of this motion is not approval of a notice to proceed or certificate of appropriateness. Final plans must be brought to the HDC for approval before any changes can be made to the structure. And I think I might need to add to this. So the motion would be to approve this conceptual plan to locate the 27 by 27 foot fragment of the greenhouse located at
The tropical house.
the tropical house located currently at 496 Central, to have its glass removed and just have a steel structure remain and restored, and located in the park to a concept plan that would be generally reflective of the concept plan that you're showing, with modifications likely to respond to feedback from this commission as well as your steering committee that would be assembled for the modification of the historic district.
I'll second.
Yeah, I was done.
Oh,
I was trying to just include everything.
Can I-
you know?
can I-
You did a great job.
Freewheeling.
Can, can we make mention of that portion retaining historical significance? Do we want to? Do we not want to?
Which
Is it-
portion?
The 27 by 27?
I
it
don't
need
have a
to?
concern of that.
Okay. I'm just
It-
trying to
it'll-
dot all the
it'll-
i's.
Yeah, it'll be in, so, yeah, from that standpoint, it'll be in good hands. It is a historic fragment. It'll be in the park. It will have a foundation, so we'll still have it in our scope. And it'll have to be modified significantly to survive, so it'll be kind of historic and kind of new in terms of its structure and its, how you seal it up and the material and everything.
Right, with a new knee wall,
And
et cetera.
And they're going to need leeway to look at this thing as more than just a historic fragment that needs to be dealt with white gloves. They're going to need ability to just do modifications.
In order for it to be structurally sound in the space that it's in.
Yeah.
And safe for,
Yeah,
And for kids to be able to climb on it.
you just read my mind, yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've seconded. Any other comments? Okay. So those who are in favor, please say yes.
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 Those who are opposed, say no. I also say yes. So it's not a COA, it's the motion to conceptually approve passes. Is that good enough?
Sounds correct to me.
Okay.
I just want to say thank you very much for walking through this with us. It's been clunky, to say the least, so.
That's a good word.
Starving,
Yeah.
absolutely starving. The tear down comment was a complete thing of that, yeah. So, but yes, we greatly appreciate it, and without your feedback and everything, all the way back to when we first started talking about this a few years ago, getting the management plan for the park done, that was huge, and this is a direct reflection of that work. So I thank you so much. So we'll continue to move it forward and look at hiring somebody to help us with the next steps. So appreciate it.
Good. Okay.
Thank you.
Good to see you. Yeah. Okay. Administrative approvals, none.
None.
Zip, zero, zilch.
Yes.
Committee and staff report.
Two things, I promise they won't take very long. The CLG 2021 annual report has been submitted for the city of Holland. I sent out, or a copy, the final copy was included in the most recent packet materials, and it did not change at all from the one that I sent out to all of you a week and a half, 2 weeks ago. So thank you to those of you who reached back out to me about that. It was a great process for me, especially coming in halfway through the year, to see what had happened before and then also what we accomplished in those last 6 months. So again, if you hadn't had a chance to review it, I highly recommend it. We talk also about what we're looking to do in the coming year ahead as well. Any questions about that? Okay, and then the last item is I would really like to maybe establish either a meeting date or a plan going ahead for final review of the design guidelines. This is something that got brought up at the very end of last year, and with spring coming around, I already use them, all the time with residents, so it'd be really nice to kind of have that final seal of approval so we can get copies printed, posted on the website. Before we had talked about having a special meeting, because again, it tends to be at the end of meetings when we've already been going for a while. So I wondered if this was something all of you were still interested in, if maybe instead we would discuss it at the April meeting. Right now, I already have 2 potential COAs for that meeting, so I anticipate more.
I hate asking for a separate meeting, but I think it's important enough that we call a separate meeting for it, just because I think we can focus on it. Because by the time I just think it would be helpful. I think we'd all be fresh and helpful if that was our only task to get through.
The goal.
I don't know if, and I'm sorry, I don't know if everybody else agrees with that. I just know that it keeps getting pushed out, and I think if we're just focused on that as the task at hand, we can probably get through it
I think so.
a little quicker.
Yeah, and I'd be willing to obviously send it out in advance for comments and sort of create a little bit more of a curated look at it to try and help that process along. It's my understanding that in the past, everyone was still meeting virtually when a lot of the text editing was happening, so we will kind of have to balance how to do that in person. However, we will most likely be upstairs in the training center, so that hopefully will enable some more freer discussion and looking over the document.
And
Yeah.
if we've all reviewed it beforehand, we can come with any questions or concerns and just take it item by item, and that shouldn't take as long if we've each had a time to kind of absorb it beforehand.
Exactly. That would be my goal. And one reminder, we do have the training on March 10 with Grand Rapids and Kalamazoo, so I understand we already have an additional HDC opportunity this month, so I wanted to just acknowledge that I realize in March we have that, just as a consideration when thinking of when to do this.
I think it's probably helpful to get through before we get into too many of the summer months.
Mm-hmm. So March, April. April? Okay. And I can send it out. I mean, it's ready now. Like, I can have it out and to all of you. This is the local guidelines that I'm specifically talking about. We can also look at the National Register recommendations. I've gone through those documents and sort of edited them and cleaned them up a bit to match what we have in the local guidelines. but it's really the local guidelines that I'm using a lot and would like to have finalized. Yeah.
So do you want to send them out to all of us and then put a couple dates out there as potential, and we can each respond back to the rest of us with dates that would work? Thanks, Anna.
Yes, that works for me. And thank you all for considering it and hopefully getting it going.
Okay, well, if that's it.
That's
Last
it.
order is adjournment. Anyone want to make a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor say yes.
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 All opposed say no. I say yes. Meeting adjourned.